So yeah, I'm Jamie Norman. I'm head of product for Redeye. Redeye is a marketing automation platform. So I've been asked to come and talk to you today about how we've implemented AI into our product. So specifically, we've used predictive models to help our clients kind of predict the behaviours of some of their customers. And I'm going to share you a little bit of theory around some AI concepts. It won't get too heavy, just to introduce it in case some of you are kind of new to that area. And then I'm going to apply some practice in terms of showing you how we very specifically had the conversations and did the implementation of bringing that into the product and the kind of journey that we went on. My talk kind of has an alternative title, which is basically how the movie industry has kind of not made it very easy for people working with AI in the tech sector. I'll come back to that in a sec. Just a bit more detail about Redeye for some context. So, as I say, we're a marketing automation platform, and we work predominantly in the retail, financial services, and travel and leisure industries. And specifically, we bring together all of the data from these clients in terms of their e-commerce platforms, their behavioral data, their transactional data, data from integrations they've got. We bring that all together in terms of a single source of the truth, and then we help play that back to them so they can use it across their multi-channel marketing campaigns. In terms of where our journey starts, it's basically in Hollywood. So I pulled together some examples of AI in the movies from the 60s all the way through to this year. And I think it's fair to say it doesn't always have the best reputation. In fact, you could argue sometimes it's a little bit evil. It's always used as a kind of malevolent plot device. And like I say, it doesn't really make things very easy when you're working in a sector and you're trying to talk about some of the ideas around AI, and the public perception kind of almost defaults to some of these things. For anyone that's following the PLG hashtag on Twitter, or happens to follow me on Twitter, some details on the screen in a minute. I had to get the plug-in for my Twitter feed. I've been running a little quiz. So if anyone wants to have a go at kind of naming all these movies, there might be some prizes. Nobody's got them all yet. So like I say, back from the 60s all the way to this year, there's examples of that. Interesting, when I was looking at this, the movie Blade Runner, which was made in 1982, was actually set in November 2019. So as of Sunday, this is now period drama. I'm really disappointed that I don't have a flying car, but we do have digital billboards now, so yay. If you want to have a go at the quiz, I'm at Mr. Jamie Norman on Twitter. It's a bit of fun, so see if you want to have a go at that. Bringing things back to the real world for a minute, I think it's fair to say the use of data in tech companies kind of has a bit of a credibility problem. So whether that's nefarious use of personal data, whether it's data breaches that you hear about, and all of the kind of legislation, particularly GDPR, that's something that's very kind of pertinent to our business, kind of highlights the fact that there needs to be a lot more transparency about what you're doing with data and how you're using that, and the whole management of that piece. Even words like algorithm now have a bit of a negative connotation. You read headlines like this where the new Apple car, there was an algorithm that kind of created a gender bias in terms of the approval of card holders. So I think it's fair to say all these things kind of mean we've got a little bit of work to do. And yeah, that's my starting point. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this in the context of AI, but this is it's not a talk about AI, it's a talk about applying AI. So I'm going to share a bit about our journey and how we've kind of made it real for people, and how we've kind of taken a product-led approach to bringing that to our product. Specifically, I want to talk about machine learning. So there's sometimes a bit of a conflation of the terms. So sometimes machine learning and AI are used interchangeably. You might have heard that. You might have wondered kind of what really is the difference. The thing that makes it ring most true for me personally is I kind of talk about it in these terms. So when you're talking to a developer, it's machine learning, and when you're pitching to a VC, it's AI. So I think that's kind of sums up where the kind of market is. So you can't go to a marketing trade show or a tech trade show at the moment and not see AI just plastered everywhere. It's like a bandwagon people are jumping on. So what we need to try and do is kind of look at where the distinction is and how we can work with that, and kind of I'm going to demystify a little bit of that, hopefully. So I was partially joking there, but seriously, there's a bit of a crossover. So if you imagine it in three levels, so artificial intelligence at a very broad level is a technique which enables a machine to mimic a human. Now, that might be why we see some of these companies that are kind of maybe cynically using AI as a marketing thing, because anything that you're doing some kind of automation, you could argue that's AI. Where I'm going to focus more specifically is around machine learning. So that's a subset of AI principles, which basically allows you to apply statistical techniques to enable machines to kind of improve with experience, whether that's supervised by a person or it kind of does it on its own, which is where we get into things like deep learning. I'm going to focus on the machine learning piece, and I'm going to give a very kind of brief overview and kind of explain what that is, how it works, and how we've implemented it in the next 15 minutes. So the first concept in terms of understanding machine learning is this notion of accuracy versus explainability. So when you get into different machine learning models, there's a lot to choose from, and there's pros and cons for each one. But if you put them on a continuum like this, on the left are the less accurate ones, and the more you move to the right, the more accurate they get. But they all come with an overhead. So the more accurate you become, the greater the weight in terms of processing and all those kind of data you need to have to support them. So if you imagine on the left, you probably just can describe it in terms of pure maths. And on the right, it's more like magic. And I mean that in the sense that even people working with neural networks, they can explain generally how they work, but they can't explain exactly how they get there and what they do and how they're doing it. And these are people that are kind of academically working in this field. To continue the sci-fi theme, there's a famous quote from Arthur C. Clarke. I'm paraphrasing, but it's along the lines of any suitably advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So that's where the connection comes in there. If I had another scale to this in terms of the explainability side, things kind of adjust to fit. So the more accurate a machine learning model is, the harder it is to explain. And that's where this kind of magical idea comes in. So if you imagine how we want to implement this into our products, and going back to this notion of trust and how we get customers on board to kind of adopt some of these principles, the transparency piece is very, very important. So the more explainable something is, the more transparency you've got. And there's like kind of a trade-off between how accurate you want the model to be and perform versus how explainable you need to make that. And that brings the notion of the black box problem. So this is a headline very recently. Google announced specifically their explainable AI, because they recognize this problem. So when Google's doing something, then people are starting to pay attention. They've been doing an awful lot with DeepMind and the neural networks. And so I can see this being much more of a concept in the industry. Translating that to what we did, so that's giving you some context for what we do and the machine learning sector in general. We were looking to introduce predictive models to our product. So how can we help our customers predict the behaviours of their customers better? And we came from this notion of starting with a familiar place, because this is a very new tech. is quite advanced. It's kind of difficult for people to kind of grasp what's going on. So we needed to kind of lead them along the way. And this comes from some kind of, I guess, challenges we had previously where we probably went too far in terms of where the customers were in terms of their own journey and understanding. So we had to kind of pare things back a bit. So I'm going to show you some more detailed stuff now, so I can apply it practically. So this is a look at the campaign management tool in Contour. So it's like a canvas metaphor, and you basically build a campaign out in a flowchart. This is a really simple one. The green box is effectively an email. There's a timer to wait for a couple of days, and then there's some rules to basically, depending on the behaviour of the person against that email, kind of what their follow-up campaigns they receive. Going back to the point I illustrated earlier, if you were more cynical, you could say, oh, this is AI because you've automated something that people were doing manually. But all this is basically a UI and an if statement. So we want to take things further than that and kind of create that distinction. To choose the people that are going to receive the email, there's a part of the tool which is called the segment builder. So segment builder basically gives users access to all of the data that we pulled together from their database, and then it translates that and makes it useful in a simple way so they can build rules to send their marketing to. So this is a really simple one to illustrate the point, but you can select people by their age, their gender, their postcode, but this also translates to people that put something in their basket and then not purchased. You may have received some of those messages. I'm sorry about that. All that data is kind of made, is kind of translated into English. So a user can effectively if they can write a sentence in English, they can understand this. They don't have to be a SQL expert. And this was our familiar place. So we had a lot of discussions within the business around how we built out the interface for this predictive tool. So we've done a lot of work with our analyst team and our data scientists in terms of testing the models outside of the tool with some of our customer data, some beta clients, getting some successes. And the business very much wanted to turn this into like a flagship product. So it needed bells and it needed whistles and it needed all the kind of things you'd expect a commercial person to ask for. One of the most interesting things that we were requested in terms of requirements was, can you make it look expensive? So I didn't really know what to do with that. I'm like, do you want gold buttons? What does that mean? But we kind of had in the business had a bit of a light bulb moment in terms of how we would introduce this to the product. So the customers that we had on board in terms of the beta trials were very much, this works great. We just need to know who are the people that fit this profile. Who are they? And then we can apply them in the campaigns that I showed earlier in terms of something that they're already familiar with and what they're doing right now. So they had a kind of a frame of reference to work to. So we started with just adding a new segment rule. So it was really familiar territory. It was basically a part of the tool they were already using. In a way, they were already using it, and we added one predictive model into that tool, which is basically prospects likely to purchase in the next 30 days. So a user could basically go into the segment builder, create a rule that says people with a score that is greater than X, and they were using the machine learning, but they were using it in a way that was familiar to them, it wasn't scary, and got results. It also put them in control. So they could layer other segment rules on top of this and kind of felt like they were more in control of things. They weren't kind of at the behest of some kind of secret black box that was kind of doing something in the background. Because when we started talking about this, we were having ideas such as you could just throw all of the data into a machine learning model, and it will just tell you who the people you need to target. But going back to that kind of explainability piece and the trust and everything like that, it just wasn't going to work. It was too big a stretch. So we started here and started to get results. And the difference in the kind of conversation was, you can have this kind of all singing, all dancing, super cool product with gold buttons, whatever you want. That's going to take months. We've got some data now. We know customers are getting some benefit from it. If we add a new segment rule here, we can get something in a few weeks. And then they suddenly understood why, all these conversations we've had before about, iterating and all these kind of things. So it really was a light bulb moment in terms of the business. The next part of this, so you're coming from a point of familiarity, but we wanted to layer on a kind of a real world outcome. So when we build more models and add more kind of depth and detail to this, how do we still keep a frame of reference that's very real to them? So we ended up building 6 models, and we did put more of a UI on it. But what we basically did was, rather than just keep building these random models that just kind of gave them all this data and didn't kind of gel together, we mapped it to a customer journey. So if you go from left to right, you've basically got prospects likely to purchase in the next 30 days. Then you've got people that are likely to purchase in the next 90 days, people likely to become a VIP. You're literally following the customer along, because what the marketers are interested in was, how do we map what we do across the customer journey, and how do we, if you look at that as a kind of a filter, how do we make sure we kind of plug any gaps and optimize every step of the journey? So the way we evolved this is basically making it very, very real for them and making it applied. Then we could start to add more detail, because the customers were asking for it. So what does this distribution of scores look like? How do I, when I want to get people at 100%, you have to kind of give them the data to work with, and they were asking for this. So, how accurate is the model? How does it perform against what if we were doing nothing, and those kind of things? And that was coming from the customer. It wasn't us trying to say, we can do this and we can do that, because the data scientists, being very purist about it, they had lots of ideas as well, and we had to hold some things back. So there's measures for machine learning models around things called specificity, around how many false positives or negatives a model's doing, but people aren't. They don't understand it, or they're not so interested in that. They just want to know, is it working for me? So there's things we have to kind of hold back a little bit, but we're giving people enough to be transparent about it and kind of giving them the data along the way. Part of that was around giving them this control. So it's all about the control piece. So by taking the machine learning model and then translating that just into a simple score, like a percentage, people get it. And they've also got some control in terms of, we want to build cohorts or segments of people that fulfill particular scores. So again, it goes back to the idea that people felt like they were in charge and in control, and it wasn't like this scary machine and black box kind of just whirring away in the background and didn't understand what was going on. We were at an event called MadFest recently, and we did a survey of the participants, lots of marketing people. Results are kind of as you'd expect. We were asking them questions around where things were going in the future, where they saw the balance of how much control a person has over where AI and machines are taking over. And you kind of got this distribution of Luddites, effectively, versus people that kind of can see that this kind of augmented intelligence is a way forward in terms of how they can help them do their job. It's more like a tool to do their job. The 8%, I don't know if they're just lazy or they just think that bots are just going to take everyone's jobs. I don't know. We need to do a bit more digging into that 8%. But very much where we're going is how we can make this kind of accessible, and as a enhancement to what people are doing, and giving them more information to make better decisions, basically. So hopefully there's a few things there that you can apply, whether you're doing AI-led work or not. I think some of those principles have been a real success story in how we've kind of taken the approach to building this feature set. And I've got a couple of takeaways just to summarise that really. So certainly start on familiar ground. So whether that's machine learning or any kind of new tech that might be a bit of a stretch, or you're building something very new on an existing system, if you start from that place, A, you've got somewhere to kind of ground that feature or product set. B, your customers will come along with you because they've got that frame of reference. Look to build trust and iterate, so give them that control. Show them that the development is happening. This is as much internally as externally. So the fact we could iterate very quickly, we could deliver that initial feature set very fast, and then build on that. That gained a lot of credibility in the business. Something we've tried to replicate even to an even greater degree since. And then build to a real frame of reference. So applying that to the customer's end goals and how that can actually apply to them in terms of what their objectives are, not what the business objectives are so much. They do complement each other. And finally, just don't be evil. I think there's a number of challenges in terms of AI, in terms of ethics and the application of it. But I think it's got some genuine advantages for people. It can support lots of areas of your products, but it doesn't have to be scary and it doesn't have to be evil either. So thanks very much.
Jamie, if there was a prize for the most questions, I think you would win.
Okay.
Yeah, no pressure, but...
I've been answering questions on Twitter all morning. Some of them got a bit philosophical.
Oh, so you're warmed up. It's fine. You'll be fine. All right. So let's start with what is the difference between machine learning and using statistics to predict behavior?
Some of those models are based on more statistical things. So I think the main difference is basically statistics are almost static, whereas machine learning is something that evolves. So the clue's in the learning. So whether that's supervised by an analyst or it's doing it by itself, that's effectively where the difference is. So some of these things are probably more aligned to statistical methodologies. But as you say, the further along that continuum you go, there's still statistics in there, but there's other elements at play in terms of how they learn and evolve.
Okay, this one's a softball. How do you see Google's quantum computing changing the landscape of predictive analytics? No pressure.
It can kind of go two ways, and this is this comes down to the trust thing, because you've already got this issue where people are just who's done this? They've been talking about a product or thinking about a product, and then you see an ad for it online, and you've got this kind of creeped out kind of sensation that, like, who's listening to your conversations and what's going on. And I think it has the power to kind of really kind of transform tech and computing and those kind of things. But I think that the ethical questions and how it's utilised are probably going to come under a lot more scrutiny. But I quote this. I quote this quote from Jurassic Park quite often. The Jeff Goldblum character, when he says something along the lines of, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think a lot of that will probably come into play, and there'll be a lot of scrutiny on that.
You just mentioned trust, and it's come up a couple of times. This question is related to that, in that building that trust, what kind of process does that look like when you're generating that with your users?
We work quite closely with them in sharing the data around the model. So some of those were kind of shown on some of the screens there. So kind of exposing the performance of the models. So how accurate are they? Our data science team kind of works very closely with our clients as well in terms of the professional services. So we kind of guide them along the way and answer their questions around that. And we usually start quite small with them. So we guide them on how to use it in their campaigns. We show them the best practice. And it's kind of just a growing process, basically. We just work very closely with them to do that. There are still some clients that just aren't ready for it at the moment, which is fine. But the ones that are, we work with them quite closely.
You were just talking about showing them those models and working with them. How much education is required when you're trying to kind of helping them build that trust? How much knowledge do you find that they have to need?
Quite a bit, but because because we focus on the output for them, some of them, different types of people, some of them want to know what's under the hood, if you like. They want to know, like, how does it work and things like that. So we are very transparent about them in terms of what data is feeding the model, because we will work with them to fine tune it. So there is some work up front in terms of the people element, in terms of the data that we need to support it, and why it's important, and which data parameters are more important to the performance of a model than others. So they're quite closely involved in terms of the data that's in there. They know, okay, so you need this data set. You put it into the model, it comes out with a score. That's all very transparent with them. And because we've got this frame of reference that they can use, they feel quite comfortable with that. Some people just they just want to know that it works.
Okay, we have time for one more question, so I'm going to make an executive decision. Yes, you said maths versus magic. So the question, with so much emphasis on explainable AI, will neural net practitioners have a tough time without using the word magic?
They will, but I think it will find its place. I think there will be a place for that kind of machine learning. And I think what Google are doing, because they are at the forefront of the magic end of the spectrum. So if they're making these things that are currently more like magic more explainable, then I think that will benefit the whole industry. It will kind of it will really help that. So I don't think they'll have a tough time because it works. I think the tough time doesn't come in the tech issues. I think it comes in the how people accept it as a technology and where it's used and those kind of things. Yeah.
Unless they're talking to a VC, and then they should say the word magic.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you, Jamie. That was fantastic.